In our previous class, we started talking about what is soil exploration, and we have understood what is the purpose of carrying out soil exploration, what are the objectives for carrying out the soil exploration, what are the different phases in which we carry out the soil exploration, and we started talking about what are the different methods by which we carry out the so-called soil exploration. In the process, we said we have what is called as broadly direct methods and indirect methods. So as we said, as of our syllabus is concerned, we'll be focusing on what is called as the direct methods, and under the direct methods, we started talking about what is called as open pit test pits is one of the direct method, and we have talked about probing or sounding method, which is another direct method, but which is not very widely used, but however we can think of using it. And the other type of direct method, in case if you want to go for deeper depths to which you want to know the condition of the soil or the condition of the ground, how the properties of the soil existing over larger depths, if you want to understand, then in such cases we said we cannot simply go for what is called as your open pit excavation, because in the case of open pit excavation you have a limitation of maximum up to 3 meters or so, uh, up to which you can go for what is called as an open pit excavation. Beyond that, it would become difficult and it becomes uneconomical to go for an open pit excavation. So in such case, we said we'll be preferring to go for what is called as your boring process. We'll make bore holes into the ground by different methods depending on the type of soil. Okay, and accordingly, we'll be collecting the soil sample, which is either in disturbed or undisturbed state, which can be used in our lab for determining the corresponding properties of the soil. And there are various other direct methods which can be carried out in the field itself. Okay, so which we call it as in situ test, by which also one can go on to determine the corresponding properties of the soil existing at different depths based on different correlations available uh, for the test results what we get from your field test to that of your corresponding soil properties what you are looking at. Okay. Now let's quickly go ahead in understanding how do we carry out the boreholes in the ground. What are the different ways or methods by which we make the boreholes into your ground when you encounter what is called as your soil or rocky strata. So we have got different methods like agar is one of the tool by which we make the borehole. Other is percussion drilling is another way of making the borehole into the ground. Or by wash boring technique we make the borehole into the ground. Or by rotary drilling mechanism by making simple drill by making the drills into the ground we may extend your boreholes till the required depth. So let's quickly understand what's the difference between each of those different techniques that we are representing here. Do we have any particular limitations with regard to the soil suitability or to the depth? Okay, so let's quickly understand one by one. So first to start with, we are starting with what is called as agar boring. So agar boring is nothing but you have what is called as an agar. Okay. So before I start talking about agar, so this agar boring is broadly classified as, or the agar what we are going to be using for extending the borehole into the ground is broadly classified as hand agar, or it is classified as mechanical agar. Even this hand agar, what we are referring to, is further classified as post hole agar, or we either further classify this hand agar as helical agar. Okay, so what we have here is we have a helical shaped rod like this, or we have a kind of a tube like this, with the hollow cross section inside with blades, cutting blades of shape like this. I'll show you those pictures. Okay. So with the help of that, we'll be cutting the soil in the process of extending the borehole into the ground. Okay. So here the agar, whatever we are talking about, is nothing but a tool or a device which is useful for cutting the soil. Okay. Yeah. So we are going to be having different sizes of the agars which we are going to be using. It totally depends on what is the diameter of the borehole, what you wanted to make. So depending on that, the corresponding size of the agar which is to be used there is deployed while making your borehole. Yeah, this is what we are calling it as your post hole agar. You can look at it here. Okay, all this what I am just indicating you are nothing but they are these what is indicated here are nothing but they are called as your post hole agars. Now, what do I mean by post hole agar? You have what is called as a conic curved shape cutting edge. Yeah, typically you can look at here. Okay, so which is where this agar setup is connected to a connecting rod with a handle at the top. So what we do is wherever you want to make the borehole into the ground, at that particular position on the ground surface, we'll be placing this agar, and by using the handle at the top, we are going to be rotating the handle. In the process of rotating the handle, this agar which has got your cutting edges will start cutting the soil which is coming in the way of pushing your agar into the ground. So while rotating your handle, this agar also starts getting rotated. In the process, when the agar is getting rotated, the soil which is coming in the region of the agar will start penetrating into the gap which is available inside the cutting edges. Okay, so the agar blades will start cutting the soil at its periphery, and whatever the soil that is getting cut will penetrate into that opening which is available, and that's how you go on to extend your borehole into the ground till your required depth. Once you start rotating the handle, the agar start cutting the soil which is coming in the way, and the soil gets filled or collected into that agar portion in the hollow portion. Once the soil is completely filled, you will not see that your further agar is getting penetrated into the ground. So in such case, agar has to be taken out with the complete setup. The soil which got collected into that hollow portion has to be removed, and then you have to further extend your borehole into the ground. This is one way. And the other way, as I said, in the case of your hand agar, is your helical agar. You have a connecting rod with a kind of a helical blade. So that helical blade is going to cut the soil which is coming in the contact with the soil while you are pushing that helical blades into the ground. So in the process of rotating that helical blades, helical agar, so soil in the surroundings is getting sheared, and that soil along the curved surface of that helical agar region, the soil gets adhered or stick to that surface of that helical curvature surfaces. Okay, and you can take out that complete helical agar device out from the ground and remove the soil, and once again you can start penetrating inside and subsequently start shearing the soil inside that borehole region what you are trying to look at. So drilling in this particular agaring technique is made using a device what is called as your soil agar. So here you have got two different types of agars, which is either hand operated or power driven. Power driven in the sense which we call it as your mechanical agar. So if it is hand operated, so you require manual labor to rotate that handle to cause the shearing in the soil with the help of the agar. And we have got limitation with the help of your hand agar because you cannot go for deeper depths to carry out the agaring process for extending the borehole by means of what is called as hand agar. You can maximum go up to what is called as 3 to 5 meters of depth only by what is called as your hand agar. Why? What could be the reason? Because if hand agar is to be used for causing the shearing in the soil and extending the borehole, the amount of effort that is to be put by the people to rotate the handle is huge, and it would become difficult as you move into the deeper and deeper depths. The stiffness of the soil increases, because of which manually causing the shearing by manual rotation is little difficult. So in such case, we will use a motorized mechanism by which you can continuously rotate at your required speed and cause the shearing in the soil, which is called as your mechanical agar. In such case of mechanical agars, you can even go up to go beyond your 5 meters depth to extend your boreholes into the ground with the help of your agar technique. Advancement is made by driving the agar by simultaneous rotation and pressing it into the soil, so that the soil, once you start rotating, the soil which is coming in the surroundings of the soil which is coming in contact with the agar gets sheared, and while pressing it, that particular soil which got sheared will get entered into your whatever hollow portion which is available in between that cutting blades, so that the soil can be taken out, it can be removed, and you can further extend your borehole into the ground. So whenever you are trying to shear the soil and take the soil out from that agar, it means that you know from what depth that soil is being collected. So you understand that particular soil, what is there at so and so depth is this type, and the corresponding soil can be tested for various properties. So you can know what are the different properties of the soil, what you are collecting from your agar. Yeah. So whatever that so-called agaring process that you are trying to carry out can be carried out in the soil or in the ground which is relatively dry or partially saturated. In the fully saturated soil, it would be difficult. Or in the case if you encounter the water table in which if you are trying to make the borehole with this agaring technique, it would become difficult. And in the process when you are making your boreholes, the hole what is getting extended is mostly an unsupported borehole what you are going to be making, because you are not having any casing that is provided there. When the agar gets filled with soil sample, it is taken out and the soil sample collected in the agar is removed and subsequently taken to the lab for carrying out your required test on that particular soil sample collected from required depth. It is relatively fast and economical. It is said to be fast only up to certain depths. Beyond that depths, if you are going further, so it would obviously takes time for carrying out your agaring process, for continuing the agaring process till the required depth of the borehole is achieved. It is very suitable, particularly for soft to medium stiff cohesive soil deposits only, and can also be used to determine the groundwater table position. So this extending the borehole can also be done to identify the position of your water table, but extending the borehole further below the position of your groundwater table would be little difficult with this so-called agaring process. Soil removed by this is mostly in a disturbed state, because with the help of your blades, either your helical blades or your agar cutting edges, you are causing the shearing in the soil, which in the sense you are disturbing the soil skeleton structure. So obviously that particular soil is said to be what is called as your disturbed soil. This particular method is said to be better than your wash boring technique or percussion drilling technique or your rotary drilling technique. So in simple terms, whenever you want to make a borehole, we prefer to go for making the borehole by what is called as your agar mechanism. But as we said, it's not suitable in all soil conditions. So it's suitable only for soft to stiff soil deposits. It is not suitable for very hard or cemented soils, or even for very soft soil deposits also. Yeah, this particular technique is not going to be very much suitable, because even in very soft soil deposits, when you are trying to make the borehole, so what would happen is once the soil is removed out of the borehole, the surrounding soil will start getting collapsed into that particular hole what you are making there. Yeah, other type of way by which you can make your borehole into the ground is percussion drilling. So in this case of technique of percussion drilling, what we are going to have is you have a kind of a hollow cylindrical tube which has got a drilling bit attached at the bottom of that. Yeah, at the bottom of this, you have what is called as a drilling bit, or rather I'll call it as a cutting edge, sharp cutting edge. Okay, so from the top you'll be lifting this cylindrical tube and you will be leaving it. So when you leave it, because of the weight with which it is falling down, you are going to see the soil will start getting cut because of the sharp cutting edge which is attached at the bottom of that hollow cylindrical tube. So that sharp cutting edge will cut the soil, and whatever the soil that is getting cut will get penetrated into this tube, and it can be taken out, and that soil can be removed out of that particular cylindrical mold, and then subsequently you can extend your so-called borehole till your required depth is achieved. This particular technique is adopted in the case of hard soils to that of your soft rocks also. Even in the case of soft rock deposits also, you are going to be making use of your percussion drilling process. And this particular technique is suitable where augering is not possible, or your wash boring technique is not possible. So for such particular soil stratas where augering or your wash boring technique is not preferable, in such case we go on to adopt what is called as a percussion drilling. Next is wash boring technique. So what do we do in the case of this wash boring technique? Once again, the wash boring technique is also useful for making the borehole into the ground. So in this case of wash boring technique, what we do is wherever you want to make the borehole into the ground, at that particular position, you are going to be placing, if you look at here, just look at here. Yeah, you have what is called as a chopping bit, where you have a connecting rod. To the bottom of that connecting rod, you have a chopping bit, and this connecting rod is a kind of a hollow tube. Through this hollow tube, water jet is going to be pumped. Water is going to be pumped with required pressure. So water passes through this connecting rod and comes out of this chopping bit. With the pressure, when you allow the water to pass into that soil medium or to that soil strata, the soil there becomes weak, and with the help of your chopping bit, as I rotate that chopping bit there, so soil which is becoming relatively weak will easily get sheared, and because of the presence of water, those soil particles which are getting sheared or which are becoming very soft, so the water tries to wash away that particular soil which is available at the bottom of that hole what you are making. So here the soil is getting sheared off because of your chopping bit while the rotation process is happening, and we are trying to inject water through this particular chopping bit at the bottom of that borehole, so that the soil particles which got sheared will now get mixed with water, and in the form of the slurry, that water starts coming out. And whatever the water along with the soil particles that is coming out of that hole what you are extending, so that will be collected in a settling tank or a collecting chamber. So particles will settle down at the bottom, and the water which is floating on the top will be collected once again in a collecting chamber or further sump in which you can store the water. From this sump, once again the water is sucked with the help of your pump or a motor, and the water is once again circulated back into the borehole, so that this continuous process can happen and you can extend your borehole till the required depth of what you are looking at. But here in this particular case, the soil what you are trying to collect is collected in your settling tank at the bottom, and that particular soil will be helpful for only just identification of the condition of the soil and various other properties, but it cannot give you what is the natural moisture content existing in that particular soil and so on, because once you have injected water, the natural water content what is existing in the soil has already got disturbed. So automatically the so-called condition of the soil what you are collecting from this in your settling tank is not the true representation of the soil what is there in the field, because soil particles are getting mixed with other particles which are existing at different depths. It's a popular method due to the use of limited equipments, because here we don't require heavy machinery and so on. Because of the limited resources which are just sufficient enough, this method is relatively said to be popular. Here, first an open hole is formed on the ground so that the soil sampling or rock drilling operation can be done below that particular hole. The hole is advanced by chopping and tipping action of the light smaller bit whichever is available at the bottom of that hollow connecting rod. Cutting edge is cutting is done by forcing water and water jet under a pressure through the rods operated inside that particular hole. So by pumping the water with the required pressure, you are cutting the soil there. The soil is becoming weak, and because of the chopping bit what is available in the form of rotation of the chopping bit, the soil there is easily getting sheared off, and those soil particles are getting mixed with the water, and those water slurry, I can call it as your soil slurry, is traveling to the ground and subsequently getting deposited at some particular pit which is digged for that particular purpose of storing that soil slurry, and the soil particles get settled at the bottom of that pit, and water starts flowing into another sump, so that it can be recirculated, and subsequent process of wash boring can be executed till the required depth is achieved. The boring is continued till the required depth. And other type of boring technique is by rotatory drilling. So this particular rotatory drilling, if you look at, it's a huge machinery with which what you have is a rotating blade, helical rotating blade. So here this kind of rotating drilling is adopted in the case of very stiff soils to that of your rocky stratus in which you want to make your borehole. So in such particular places, you'll be going for this what is called as rotatory drilling mechanism. So at the bottom of that helical blades, you have what is called as your drill bits. You can see here the small drill bits. What does that drill bits does means they are going to make the holes into the borehole what you are trying to extend, or borehole into a rocky strata. So it's not so easy to make holes into the rocky strata. So these drill bits are going to make some punching into that rocky strata, and then subsequently you are going to be extending that hole by the process of rotation and subsequent drilling process simultaneously taking place. Rotatory drilling method of boring is useful in case of highly resistant strata. Highly resistant strata in the sense the strata which has got relatively high resistance against the shearing. It could be a rocky strata, it could be highly stiff soil strata. It can be convenient to be used in the case of sands as well as silty soil deposits also. Here the boreholes are advanced in depth by the process of rotatory percussion method, which is similar to that of your wash boring technique. But here in the case of rotatory drilling mechanism, you are applying some pneumatic pressure by which you make the rotatory rotation or holes into the ground to extend the borehole. But there in the case of wash boring, you are making use of water jet to cause the shearing in the soil accordingly, by which you are extending the borehole. And moving on to the different types of indirect methods. So these indirect methods are otherwise also called as geophysical methods. So here in this particular geophysical methods are indirect methods. The so-called soil exploration is carried out not by making holes into the ground, rather by generating some waves. Okay, so those waves will travel into the ground, and depending on the time required for the waves to travel through each of the soil strata, we are going to be finding out the density of the soil, the depth of the soil strata, and other various other properties of the soil condition. And as we are not making any boreholes to subsequently understand the condition of the soil for collecting the soil sample and taking it to the lab for subsequent determination of the various properties, what we the advantage of this particular indirect methods is this can be adopted relatively over a very large areas in which you are required to explore the condition of the ground or understand the condition of the ground. But however, these indirect methods alone cannot give you a complete understanding about the ground condition there. So these indirect methods in combination with some of the tests conducted on the soil specimen samples collected from different depths you can try to get a clear picture about the condition of the site in which you are required to be taking up the construction. But however, as of the syllabus is concerned, we are not going into the details of understanding about this indirect methods. But however, I'll just try to give you a glimpse onto what are the different types of methods that we have got in this indirect methods. Different subclassification in the indirect methods. One is seismic refraction method, electrical resistivity method, magnetic measurements method, gravitational measurements method, and so on. But out of all this, these two methods like seismic refraction method and your electrical resistivity method, these are very widely used methods for determining or for exploring the ground, for understanding the condition of the ground in the case of your indirect methods. Yeah, I just gave you some detailed understanding about this. What is this seismic refraction method and subsequently the electrical resistivity method, which I am not going through, but all those who are interested in knowing about them can go through these particular slides, which will give you an idea of what is this seismic refraction method and subsequently what does the electrical resistivity method mean, by which you are going to be exploring the condition of the ground. Okay. Next, ultimately from this so-called direct method, in whatever the direct methods that we have talked about, it could be your test pit or maybe your so-called boring process. What we are trying to do, we are trying to collect the soil sample. Okay, we are trying to collect the soil sample for determining the respective properties of the soil which is available at different depths in the field. Now, what different types of soil samples are collected on a broader way? We say the soil samples are collected either in what is called as disturbed state or undisturbed state. Now, what is meant by disturbed soil sample or what is meant by undisturbed soil sample? In case, if the nature of the soil skeleton structure is getting changed, if it is partially getting changed or fully getting changed, or if the soil skeleton structure is completely getting destroyed, so that particular soil sample is what is called as disturbed soil sample. You know, what is meant by undisturbed soil sample? If the nature of the soil sample, the soil skeleton structure, the particle arrangement of the soil formation, if it is not getting disturbed at all, if it is not getting changed, soil particle arrangement is not getting altered, so such soil sample is what is called as your undisturbed soil samples. Okay, so your disturbed soil samples can be used for determining the index properties of the soil, like it could be your grain size analysis or your plasticity in like your Atterberg limits. So those values can be determined with the help of your disturbed soil samples. And from your undisturbed soil samples, you can go on to determine both your index properties as well as your other engineering properties, like your permeability of the soil, shear strength of the soil, the consolidation aspects of that particular soil. All that we can go on to find out on your undisturbed soil sample. Now, let me give you an idea of whether the soil sample what is collected in your sampling tube, I'll repeat, the soil sample which is collected in a sampling tube, whether it is to be called as a disturbed sample or undisturbed sample. Okay, if the soil skeleton structure is easily understood that it got altered, the sample got broken into pieces, you could see small broken pieces of the soil skeleton structure or small soil grains, then it indicates what is called as a disturbed soil. But sometimes what happens is you have a hollow cylindrical tube which is pushed inside the ground, and whatever the soil that is collected in that hollow cylindrical tube which is pushed inside the ground, whether that soil sample is to be called as a disturbed sample or undisturbed sample, sometimes there will be a confusion. Why? Sir, why is the confusion? Because I have pushed my tube, soil got entered into the tube and I have taken it out. Why should I call it as a disturbed sample? See, when you are pushing the tube inside the ground, look at here. If I consider this to be my tube, when I am pushing this tube inside the ground, what is going to happen? The soil particles which are coming in contact of this cutting edge will either move outward from this tube or will move either into this tube. If these soil grains are moving into the tube, what is going to happen? to the density of the soil which is getting collected inside the tube, there could be a possibility that the density of the soil might sometimes gets altered, which indicates that the soil skeleton structure is getting disturbed. Okay, so in which case the soil sample collected in the sampling tube is to be called as disturbed, and in which case it should be called as undisturbed. That totally depends on what is called as area ratio of that particular sampling tube. Okay, so we are going to calculate what is called as the area ratio of the sampling tube, which is used for collecting the soil sample. Let's say, for example, this is my cross section of the hollow cylindrical tube which I am looking at. So most of the times your sampling tubes, what you are going to be okay, just a minute. Okay, this what I am indicating here indicates you the thickness of the sampling tube. Please do understand, I am not able to properly draw it. Yeah, so this is how yeah. Let's say this is your hollow cylindrical tube, what we are trying to talk about. If you look at this hollow cylindrical tube, at the bottom of the tube, where the soil sample is entering in, the diameter of that cylindrical tube, let me indicate it as D naught. The inner diameter of the tube, hollow cylindrical tube, is what I am indicating it as D1. The outer diameter of this sampling tube is what I am indicating it as D2. D0 indicates dia at entry. D1 indicates inner diameter. D2 indicates outer diameter of the sampling tube. Here I am going to be defining what is called as a term, that is area ratio, which is defined as area or the cross-sectional area of hollow tube divided by the total area of the tube. If you want, into 100, if you multiply, it gives you in percentage. What is cross-sectional area of the hollow tube means? So cross-sectional area of the hollow tube indicates it is the outer cross-sectional area minus the inner cross-sectional area, which is pi by 4 into d2 square minus pi by 4 into d1 square. This is what is your hollow cross-sectional area of that tube divided by the total cross-sectional area of the tube. The total cross-sectional area of the tube is nothing but the outer cross-sectional area of the tube. So into 100. If this so-called area ratio, whatever you are trying to calculate, if this is coming out to be less than 10%, we say the soil sample which is getting collected, I repeat, the soil sample which is getting collected in the sampling tube is mostly existing in undisturbed state. In case if the area ratio what you are calculating, if it is coming out to be something greater than 10, we say the soil sample what got collected in that particular sampling tube is mostly in disturbed state, and that soil sample cannot be certainly used for determining the shear strength of the soil, or maybe the permeability of the soil, or maybe your compressibility characteristics of the soil. Yeah, the soil sample, whatever you are trying to collect, what could be the causes of causing the disturbance to the soil skeleton structure? It could be because of the volume disturbance, that's a change in volume, or maybe because of the side friction between the sampling tube and the soil, or because of your change in moisture content, or because of your change in the stress levels what are existing in the soil sample when it was in the ground and when it was taken out of the ground. And it could be also because of your working environment, the way by which you are collecting your soil sample in that sampling tube. Okay, and it could be also because of your improper sharing of the soil sample while it is getting collected in your sampling tube, or it could be various, it could be because of various any other reason. But ultimately, if you are trying to cause the disturbance to the soil skeleton structure, then that soil is ultimately to be called as your disturbed soil sample. Next, moving on to understand how much is the amount of exploration that we are required to be carrying out in the ground to have a clear picture about how is the condition of the soil there. Amount of exploration in the sense, what should be the depth to which I should extend my borehole. What is meant by exploration? Exploration in the sense, you are trying to understand the condition of the ground. How are we trying to understand the condition of the ground? Either by making use of your test pits, or by making use of your boreholes, what you are making into your ground. Okay, so now these test pits are very easily understood. Okay, we go on to make that open pit excavation to up to a depth of 3 meters or so on. But when it comes to the case of your boreholes, what should be the maximum depth till which your borehole is to be made? Even this test pit also, what should be that particular depth to which I can go on to make extend that particular pit excavation? Should I go for 1 meter, or should I go for 2 meters, or should I go for 10 meters, or should I go for 20 meters? And likewise, such number of 20 meters depth of boreholes, how many number of boreholes I should make? Whether I should make 1 or 10 or 100. So it is very important for us to know what should be the depth of the borehole and how many number of boreholes that are to be made in that particular site, to get a clear understanding about your site area. Okay, so the amount of exploration is nothing but it is to decide upon what is the extent of investigation, to what extent both in the lateral direction as well as in the vertical direction you should extend your investigation. So which indicates that determine the number of boreholes, knowing about the location where exactly I should make my borehole, and subsequently what should be the depth of open excavation or the depth of your boring which you are going to be making there. Okay, so number of boreholes is something important. Position of the borehole, where should I make those boreholes, is also very important. It in the sense, if one borehole is made here, next borehole at what distance I should be going for the next borehole, and what should be the depth till which I should go for my borehole. Okay, so that so-called extent of investigation, whatever we are talking about in terms of number of boreholes or depth of the boreholes or the position of the boreholes, basically depends on your site conditions, and it also depends on the nature and extent of the project. Nature and extent of the project in the sense, whether it is for a roadway, or whether it is for the construction of an embankment, or whether it is for the construction of a residential building, or whether it is for the construction of what is called as a lightly loaded structure, or maybe a commercial building. So what is it? Depending on that, your number of boreholes, the depth of the boreholes, position of the borehole would be depending on. And it also depends on the time that is available for you to carry out your soil exploration or geotechnical investigation, and also the amount that is available, and it also obviously depends on the equipment that is available for carrying out your so-called borehole till the required depth. Now let us just have a clear idea about to what depth, how many number of boreholes I should be making, and at each position, what should be the depth till which I should go on to extend my borehole. Let us try to have a clear idea about it. In case, if my proposed foundation, okay, let's say if my proposed foundation is a shallow foundation. Shallow foundation in the sense what? My foundation, what I am going to be constructing, is relatively at a shallow depth below the ground, at a smaller depth below the ground. So I am required to construct my foundation. So in such particular case of shallow foundation, how do we generally construct a shallow foundation? Means if this is my ground, okay, so into that ground we make what is called as an open pit like this. At the bottom of that open pit, we go on to construct your foundation like this. On top of that foundation, you have got your column coming, and from that column, the load is getting applied. And ultimately, what is happening? The load, what is coming from the column, is getting distributed from the footing onto the soil on which that footing or the shallow foundation is resting. Let's say the width of this foundation is something B. The depth at which this foundation is constructed below the ground, I am indicating it as something df. Now, my objective here is to understand what should be the depth of your foundation. Now, what I am just trying to understand here is in the process of this geotechnical investigation or soil exploration, I just want to know what should be the depth of borehole or your so-called open pit. In case if you are going for open pit, or in case if you are going for borehole, what should be the depth till which I should continue to understand the condition of the soil? Till what depth I should carry out my so-called geotechnical investigation below the ground level. Okay, so the depth till which you should extend your geotechnical investigation is nothing but the so-called depth of investigation. Whatever I am going to be carrying out should be equal to, obviously, from the ground, it is equal to depth of the footing. Now, is it only till the depth of the footing I should understand the condition of the soil? No. It is also important for us to understand the condition of the soil, which is there below the footing position also. Now, below the footing position, when I say till what depth below the footing position, I need to be knowing the condition of the soil. Generally, let's say if the stress what is getting transferred from the footing onto the soil at the footing level is something Q. Okay, the stress what I am just trying to induce from the footing onto the soil due to the load coming from the column, the stress induced from the footing onto the soil is something small q. Now, I should try to understand the condition of the soil below the footing up to a depth, which I am writing it as Z, which is in general given as 2 to 3 times that of your width of the footing. What does this Z below the footing position means? At the depth of Z meters below the footing, that Z could be anything. Okay, at the depth of Z meters below the footing, the amount of stress what is getting induced in the soil, stress at the depth of that Z below the footing, should approximately become 10% of the stress what you have tried to induce through the footing. Okay, whenever the stress level getting developed in the soil at certain depth below the footing is the stress induced in the soil at certain depth below the footing, when it becomes 10% of the original stress what you have transferred through the footing onto the soil, then till that particular depth we should surely understand the condition of the soil, because ultimately the foundation settlement depends on what? Will it depend on the soil which is there above the footing level? No. The foundation settlement depends on the soil which is there below the footing level. Below the footing till what depth? Is it till an infinite depth? No. Till some depth in which the effect of the load what is transferred from the foundation is seen in the soil layer, in the soil strata. So what is that depth of the zone of influence of what load you are transferring from the foundation onto the soil means? The zone of influence is generally represented as 2 to 3 times that of your width of the footing. How do you say that is only your zone of influence? Because beyond that particular depth, the amount of stress level developed in the soil is becoming less than that of the 10% of the stress what you have tried to induce from the footing onto the soil. So till that depth is what we are calling it as your zone of influence. So my depth of investigation is equal to from the ground surface, till what depth I should go on to carry out my soil investigation, means it is equal to the depth of the foundation plus 2 to 3 times the width of the footing plus an additional 1 to 2 meters. So this much should be the depth of the investigation what you are required to be carrying out in your field, in case if you are going for what is called as a shallow foundation. This is one way in the case of shallow foundation. The other way is, until we come across with what is called as a hard stratum, you can go on to extend your borehole. Okay, so this is typically in the case of a shallow foundation. If you are going to carry out what is called as a shallow foundation for the construction of your structure, so in such case of construction of shallow foundation, the depth to which you should go on to carry out your detailed exploration, soil exploration, means it can be either based on this expression what you have calculated, or till you come across with a very relatively hard stratum, because if a hard stratum is available, obviously hard stratum will have more bearing capacity or more load carrying capacity. So you can go on to construct your foundation on that particular hard stratum. That should be sufficient enough. In case if you are coming across with what is called as a deep foundation, okay, the type of foundation what you want to construct is a deep foundation. So in such case of deep foundation, what should be the depth to which you want to go, you want to construct what is called as your, you want to go for your soil exploration. So in the case of your deep foundation, the depth to which I should carry out my soil exploration or geotechnical investigation is obviously up to what is called as a hard stratum, or either I can say it need not be a very hard stratum like a rocky strata, at least until you go till some competent strong stratum is available. So until you find relatively a strong soil strata available, or until you find what is called as a rocky strata available, you go on to continue your so-called geotechnical investigation by making the borehole, and subsequently understand the condition of the soil till that particular depth. This is regarding the depth of the borehole what you are required to be making. Next is how many number of boreholes we are required to make in that construction site. How many number of boreholes I am required to be making? So that depends, as I told you, it depends on the type of the project, extent of that particular project, and so on. In case if the type of the project is an ordinary building, okay, so we are required to make the boreholes at every 30 to 50 meters interval. That means if I have one borehole which is made here, then another borehole I am going to be making at another 30 to 50 meters distance. Let's say, for example, this is my area in which the building is to be constructed. Let's say I have started from one particular corner, or maybe from center if I start, center of that region. So one borehole if it is made here, another borehole you can try to make relatively at a distance of some 30 to 50 meters. Another borehole somewhere here 30 to 50 meters, another borehole here 30 to 50 meters. Approximately at that distances you can go on to make boreholes at different places to explore the condition of the ground. That depends on what type of building. If it is an ordinary building, yes, the importance of the construction is relatively less. Sir, importance is less, does it mean that you don't want the building to sustain? Yes, building has to sustain, but in terms of the money being invested, in terms of the lives it is going to cost, we say it is relatively less important. In case if it is a multi-story building, like commercial complex or high-rise buildings, so as the importance of the structure is increasing, the money involved and people using that is more. So for every 15 to 30 meters interval itself, you should go on to have another borehole which is to be carried out. In the case of bridges, if the construction what you are talking about is a bridge, so generally at the abutments, you are required to make your boreholes. In the case of highways, let's say for example, for every 100 to 300 meters, we are required to be making our boreholes in that particular area of work which you are required to carry out. Let's say, for example, your depth of the borehole, simple mathematical expression, depending on whether it is a high-rise building or a simple ordinary building. So we are going to calculate the depth of the borehole as 3 into s to the power of 0.7, some empirical relation which is given. This is applicable in the case of light buildings. Light buildings in the sense the load coming from these buildings is relatively less on the soil or on the ground. And this depth of the borehole is in fact given as 6 into s to the power of 0.7 in the case of your heavy buildings. In the sense the load coming from these particular buildings is relatively high. In the case of high-rise buildings, towers, and so on. Where in these expressions, S refers to that of number of stories or floors. Okay, so S here refers to that of number of stories or number of floors. So accordingly, if you know I am required to design a building of 10 floors, so S will be substituted as 10 floors, and accordingly you will be approximately calculating it as what should be the depth of the borehole that you are supposed to be making there in that particular site, approximately. And one important thing is how much, because as we have mentioned in our earlier slide, so your so-called extent of borehole in terms of number of boreholes and the depth of the boreholes, it also even depends on the cost of the project. Sometimes what happens is that people do not invest even single rupee. They get some fake certificate saying that okay, the properties of the soil is so and so, so and so. But what is going to happen in later stage? After constructing the structure, you are going to see the adverse effects on that particular structure in terms of the failure and so on. So what the guidelines suggest is minimum of 0.5 to 1% of total cost of the project. Okay, total cost of the project has to be invested for what is called as your soil exploration. So soil exploration are the so-called geotechnical investigation. So in order to have a clear understanding about that particular construction site, a minimum of what is called as 0.5 to 1% of the total construction cost has to be surely invested towards the understanding of that particular soil there. Okay, you should not be very conscious in saving the money in terms of what is called as your soil exploration. If you invest money properly, then only you will be able to understand the soil condition correctly. Without which, any structure what you are trying to design there doesn't make any sense, because if proper investigation is not carried out in that particular location, and if you are constructing the structure, who can ensure the safety of that structure? Nobody can ensure the safety of that particular structure there. Okay, next, what are the different types of in situ tests that we are going to be conducting directly in the field? So we will come across with different types of in situ tests which can be conducted directly in the field for understanding the soil condition there. So one of such tests is what is called as standard penetration test. Another is cone penetration test. In this cone penetration test, we have got other subclassification, like which is called as static cone penetration test and dynamic cone penetration test. And we'll also be coming across with what is called as your field vane shear test, plate load test, pressure meter test, dilatometer test, and so on. You have got different field tests available. But however, as of our course is concerned, we are going to be focusing on what is called as your standard penetration test, static cone penetration test, field vane shear test, and plate load test. Plate load test is going to be helpful for us in understanding the suitability of the soil for the shallow foundation. And later on, we will also be talking about what is called as pile load test, which is not helping us in knowing the soil condition, but which will be helping us in knowing what is going to be the load carrying capacity of your so-called deep foundation which you are going to be constructing. Immediately in this particular unit, I'll be focusing to discuss about your standard penetration test, and I'll be focusing on discussing about your static cone penetration test as well as your field vane shear test. But however, I'll not be discussing about this field vane shear test again in this particular course, because already in soil mechanics we have talked about our vane shear test, but it was in terms of your lab point of view. In the field point of view also, the way how the vane shear test is performed, everything remains the same, except that test setup is different. In the case of lab, the test setup of the vane shear test is very small. In the field, you are going to have large size vane shear blades which are pushed directly into the ground, and you are going to cause the shearing in the soil. Apart from that, there is no difference at all with regard to that of the test condition, in which case the vane shear test is suitable and so on. Everything remains the same except the size of your testing equipment. Otherwise, everything is same. So our main focus in next subsequent classes will be on to understand what is the standard penetration test and subsequently the static cone penetration test. And coming to the plate load test, I'll be talking about this plate load test in our third unit while discussing about our shallow foundations. Next is planning and investigation. How one has to plan a proper investigation, how systematically we should carry out our investigation. What are the various factors that we should take into consideration, sequential manner, how we should carry out our investigation. Like as already we have talked about, in the process of summarizing everything, we are just trying to represent here. Amount and extent of exploration. Amount in the sense, how many number of boreholes, what should be the depth of the borehole, covering the complete construction site, that we should understand. And method of exploration. So how we are going to make that borehole? Is it by open pit or by augering process or percussion drilling or maybe rotary drilling or by wash boring? So what is it? So depending on that, we should understand how that so-called method of exploration, what method of exploration has to be adopted, and how we are required to be collecting our soil sample, what should be the sampling mechanism that we should be adopting, and what are the tests that are to be conducted both in the lab as well as in the field, depending on the requirement and the suitability of the soil condition. And whatever the tests that are conducted either in the lab or in the field, how they are to be, how the results are to be computed and recorded in the preparation of your geotechnical report. Because at the end of any geotechnical investigation, we are required to prepare a proper report. Okay, so that report, what does it, what information that particular report should contain means, it should start with the initial fundamentals of how you started your investigation, how the investigation got progressed, like reconnaissance survey, preliminary investigation, detailed investigation. In that detailed investigation, how the boreholes are carried out, what is the mechanism by which your boreholes are made, what are the number of, how many number of boreholes are made, where is the position of those boreholes, what is the depth of each borehole. Okay, and by collecting the soil sample, by extending the borehole, whether the sample collected was disturbed or undisturbed. If it is disturbed, what tests are conducted on the disturbed soil sample? On the undisturbed soil, what tests are conducted? What are those test results? All those test results are to be tabulated and listed. And if at all any field tests are conducted, what are those field tests? What are those test results that you have got? Okay, all of them are to be properly represented in your geotechnical investigation report. And what is the time over which your so-called investigation is carried out? How much is the cost that you have incurred in the process of carrying out your geotechnical investigation? As I mentioned, at least a minimum of 0.5 to 1% of the total cost of the project has to be invested as per the standard norms. for carrying out a proper detailed investigation in that particular site where you are required to understand the soil condition. And yeah, as I told, like how many number of boreholes, what should be the depth of the borehole, all the information regarding to the institute test that you have conducted, the test procedure, test results, all that remarks, everything you have to properly record in your report. And ultimately, you should give a proper conclusion by looking into the results what you have obtained. What are your proposals? Okay, for any construction, the soil that it's built on is great importance, because any construction that you are trying to take up, on which type of soil you are constructing it, what are the properties of that particular soil, to what depth the effect of load coming from that particular soil is seen in that particular soil strata, all that understanding has to be very clearly known. If the foundation is not set on solid ground, because any structure what you want to construct ultimately has to be constructed on the foundation. Where is that foundation resting? It is resting on the soil. So if the soil is strong, the foundation is going to be strong. If the foundation is strong, structure is strong. If soil is not properly strong on which the foundation is constructed, we say the foundation is failing. If foundation is failing, the structure is going to fail. So the geotechnical investigation plays a major role in deciding on what is the suitability of the foundation, which type of foundation is suitable there. And depending on that type of foundation what you are taking up, your subsequent structure what you want to construct would also be depending on. Okay, so this so-called geotechnical investigation, whatever you are carrying out, is very much suitable in design and construction of your new structures, and also for evaluating the causes of distress in case if there are any failures that has happened in the ground or any existing structure. What could be the possible reason? What are the reasons for that so-called failures which took place in that particular existing structures? And for understanding what are the remedial measures that can be taken up for the existing structures which are expected to undergo the failure, maybe because of the completion of the lifespan of the structure, or maybe because of various other failures which are getting initiated in that particular structure, and so on. So all that can be understood once we know a clear understanding about the so-called geotechnical investigation or the soil exploration of that particular site in which you are required to take up the construction. Okay, so with this, I'll stop my discussion for today. In our next class, we'll continue our discussion with different field tests. Like we started talking about standard penetration test and your static cone penetration test is what we'll be trying to talk about in this particular unit. As I told, like vein shear test is also another field test which we are supposed to be focusing on. But however, I'm not going to be taking up that vein shear test in detail again here, because already we have come across that vein shear test in our soil mechanics course. Okay. Yeah, thank you.